What up, everybody? I'm Temkin. It's showtime right here on Phantom. We're live on Facebook. We're live on a bunch of pages along the Facebook network, as well as YouTube and Twitch. I'm Temkin. So make sure to post your comments, hit the share button. We'll get started here in a moment, but I do want to thank our partners here at Phantom who are allowing me to cross-post this along their pages. If you don't know, go check them all out. We're broadcasting live on the Law Nation page, Silver and Blue Nation, Big Game James, Joe Boo, and the Dallas Prospect. And I will be live tonight at 9 o'clock Central talking Cowboys with Law Nation on his YouTube page, along with Derek from the Dallas Prospect, Law Nation, myself, and Big Game James. So check us all out tonight, 9 o'clock Central, for a Cowboys-centric discussion tonight on a lot of different topics. I'm really looking forward to being on tonight with those guys. And again, we are broadcasting live along all of those pages. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Every day at noon, I go live and we talk about, well, the most pressing thing in San Antonio sports. So no matter what that is, we'll be talking about that here. Post your comments wherever you are, and I'll find you at some point. David Alejandre is on the Temkin radio page. He says, what up, David? How are you, buddy? Law Nation, Tyson Patrick Sr. says, go Cowboys. Normally every day I get started with three things I think, which I'll do in a second here. But again, want to thank everybody for joining us along the Phantom Network. Ron Smith gives me the thumbs up on the Silver and Blue Nation page. What up, Ron Smith? How are you, buddy? Let's check in on the Big Game James page as well. Jason Myers says, what up, Big Game James? What up, Jason Myers? I'm Temkin. Nice to talk to you. Let's check out the Joe Boo page as I scroll through all of these different pages and say hello to everybody individually. All right, that seems like it's it for now at least. So I'll keep an eye on that as we move along. But again, this is showtime. I'm Temkin live every day at noon right here on Phantom, the New World Order of sports media. All right, three things I think. Legacy, legacy, legacy. We must define, redefine, and opine the legacy of LeBron James on a nightly, a shot-by-shot basis. His teammates suck. He's tired. And here's my favorite. He's apathetic. He's apathetic. He checked out, as you see above my right shoulder. Because remember, he couldn't possibly be the super-duper star of millennials without a boatload of excuses. He's tired. Moments of fatigue. Tyronn Lue says he's tired. We've got other media publications making more excuses for LeBron. He's exhausted. He's tired. He's worn out. He's tired. You know how many games he played? God, he's played in so many games this year. Oh, LeBron James is so tired. Legacy, legacy, legacy. That's the first thing I think. This is three things I think right here on Showtime along the Phantom Network. The second thing I think is, so remember when there was a point in time and we used to compare LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony? Remember that? Everybody remembers that, right? Like, there was a point in time where we would go back and forth and sort of discuss and break down the differences, and, you know, they were certainly in the same class as each other, both literally from being in the same draft class and figuratively from a standpoint of we figured Carmelo was that good. Let's check it on Carmelo Anthony. There's my buddy Ryan Hollins doing big-time work over at ESPN. Carmelo Anthony cries foul over Kyle Korver comparison on Instagram. Doesn't look like things are going very well for our buddy Carmelo Anthony. Oklahoma City Thunder veteran Carmelo Anthony strongly disagreed with an Instagram post stating that Cleveland Cavaliers sharpshooter Kyle Korver is a better player than he is at this point in their NBA careers. Ouch. Wow, with like 15 W's, Anthony wrote in response to the post from his verified Instagram account. He also posted crying, laughing emojis and wrote, had to comment on this one, FOH, he added. All right. Anthony, a three-time Olympic gold medalist and NCAA champion, had a subpar season with the Thunder in 17-18 while taking on a new role. The 33-year-old forward averaged a career-low 16 points on 40% shooting as a catch-and-shoot option rather than being the isolation, heavy volume scorer he had been for much of his career. He averaged 5.8 rebounds per game. So now they're kind of just breaking down. Ian Begley's just breaking him down. But, like, we're talking about LeBron James's legacy in the context of the history of the NBA and the juxtaposition of Carmelo having to take to Instagram to defend his honor when somebody basically said that he is, at this point of his career, not as good as Kyle Korver is at this point in his career, gives you a pretty good idea of the state of Carmelo Anthony's career. By the way, Carmelo Anthony is, at this point in his career, a better player than Kyle Korver. But the fact that it's even kind of a discussion, the fact that you're kind of like, well, shows you where he is. And Carmelo, look, Carmelo deserves credit because I think he's always been viewed as a selfish me-first player, rightfully so. But look, I think he accepted his role in Oklahoma City, and because of it, he wasn't getting the volume of shots that he got when he was with New York. He wasn't getting the attention that he was. I mean, he took a back seat to the other guys, whether he wanted to or not. And, I think his point total, his shooting percentages were all a reflection of that. But I also think, Carmelo's just kind of what he is, right? I mean, he's like Rudy Gay, right? Like, if he's on a good team, he's probably your third or fourth option. But if he's on a bad team, he could be a 20-point scorer a night, right? It's kind of where he is. My third thing I'm thinking is...
Well, the first rule of getting better is showing up. You can't make anything better without showing up. So
Antonio Brown.
I think if he show up, make everyone understand where you want to be. You want to be here for not this year, for years to come. Come out here and show up. Show up and get better and show guys you're serious.
Man, there is a high level of DGAF on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I love it. So you have Antonio Brown, who's being asked about Le'Veon Bell, who is not at Pittsburgh Steelers OTA. Everybody knows that, he wants a new contract, and so this is part of the holdout of the new contract. So Antonio Brown basically saying he should be here. You can't get better unless you're here. Which, by the way, in his career, Antonio Brown, this is important to note, has threatened to miss time, or at least there have been reports that he threatened to miss time over contract negotiations, but he never has. In fact, the quote that he just gave you is the exact same quote he said years back when he showed up to training camp, even though he was undergoing contentious contract negotiations. I love the DGAF for the Steelers, though, because remember when the Steelers drafted Mason Rudolph, and then Ben Roethlisberger was like, I can't believe they wasted a third-round pick on Mason Rudolph, and I'm not here to mentor a future quarterback. Which, by the way, I believe is the exact same thing he said when asked about if he was going to mentor Landry Jones. I agree with it, right? Like, Ben Roethlisberger is completely and utterly about him, as he should be. There's no, the idea that quarterbacks should mentor other quarterbacks is bizarre, right? Because it's like, why would I mentor Mason Rudolph when he's coming for my job? Like, Ben Roethlisberger's out there to try to prove that he's the best quarterback of the roster, and if he mentors Mason Rudolph or mentors Landry Jones, then he's not putting himself in potential position to be the best quarterback of the roster. I also think he probably feels like nobody mentored me. I mean, Tommy Maddox was my mentor. So you kind of have to make your own way in this world. And I'm okay with that. I'm completely and utterly okay with that. With any quarterback on any roster at any given time saying, look, I'm not about, mentoring other quarterbacks. I am not about to mentor the guy that's going to replace me on this roster. It's showtime. I'm Temkin. It's three things I think. I love the DGAF on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. By the way, Antonio Brown, it's funny because, you look at his story, and, well, his contract negotiations worked out. He got paid. That's great. And the thing that I find funny is, because he plays a premium position, Le'Veon Bell is not in position to get paid. I know he's a plus back in the NFL, but where is he on the top five? You've got Gurley, you've got Zeke, you've got Kareem Hunt, and maybe fourth, right? Maybe third because he's got more of a history than Kareem Hunt does. But the thing about running backs is every snap, every handoff brings them closer and closer to extinction. There is such a short shelf life, and every year that he plays, he brings himself further and further from negotiations. And if you're the Steelers, is replacing him. What's the difference between somebody that you could pay basically league minimum or close to it versus paying him $43 million a year? You're not going to pay him. There's no need for you to be paying him. So just it's really not comparable to anybody else because I mean, you know, you're just not a premium position like some of these other guys are. Greg Zuniga in the house. What up, Greg Zuniga? AD Singh watching. My mother-in-law is watching as well. So is Corey Cole. What up, people? How are you? Checking out the Law Nation page. Say Primetime says Go Cowboys. There you go. Silver and Blue Nation. Ron Smith still checking in. What up, Ron Smith? All right, that looks like it's it. Anybody watching on YouTube? No, doesn't look like it. Anybody watching on Twitch? No. Oh yeah, people are watching on Twitch, but I'm not entirely sure that anybody's commenting. Cool. I checked in. That's 3 things I think. Right here on Phantom. This is Facebook's Sports Network. We are the new world order of sports media. So make sure to check out the page, check out what we're doing, check out our great partners. And again, I will be talking Cowboys tonight, 9 o'clock, with Law Nation on his YouTube page. So go check it out, 9 o'clock on the Law Nation YouTube page. I'll be along with my buddy Law Nation, Derek from the Dallas Prospect, and Big Game James with producer G, Gary Likens, producing the show tonight. So really excited about that. So go check that out. So let's move on to the big story now, unless anybody has some comments or thoughts on what I've been talking about so far in the 3 things I think portion of this broadcast. All right, let's go to leadership. Let's talk about leadership. So, before we get to that, I do want to get to leadership, but I had a funny Antonio Brown story that I wanted to share that I was going to share, but that I didn't share. All right, so real quickly, Antonio Brown story before we get to the Cowboys OTAs and leadership. So with my former job at ESPN San Antonio, I used to be able to go to Super Bowl Radio Row every year. And, as part of that, you get to go to different parties and whatnot. And it's always fun, right? Like going to those parties, checking them out. And so one of the parties that I've had a chance to go to every year is the Ditka Jaws Cigar Party. And it's this great party every year because it really includes like just the biggest names in the NFL. And it's all in order to raise money for Ditka and Jaws, who are raising money for former players. So current players are being taken care of way more so from a brain trauma concussion standpoint than their predecessors, than the guys that came before, the generations of players that came before. So it's a great cause, right? To support all these guys that didn't get the contracts the current guys get and don't have any of the life, the health insurance policies that those guys get. They just don't have any access. And by the way, they played a more dangerous game, that they didn't really care about concussions or head injuries, and I can go on and on and on. So it's great because it's always like, the example the story I'm going to tell you is from Houston. So the Super Bowl in Houston a couple of years back. And I mean, Ray Lewis was there. And Orlando Pace, but even like current big time players. Von Miller was at that party. Trying to think. Joe Flacco was there. Big time names. You know what I mean? Like, but yet there was one guy who people were just enamored with. So I mean, what it is people in the area have access to buy expensive tickets, and then those expensive tickets, they get to basically have dinner and mingle with all these players and hang out at this party, right? But it's open to the public insofar as you can buy tickets that are expensive, that again, all the proceeds are benefiting, the older players and their health issues. So it's like people can mingle with the players, and most of the players are open to it because that's part of the spirit of what's going on at the event. But like, people could not stop mingling with this one guy, who I guess everybody thought was Antonio Brown. Like, because I think I overheard somebody being like, that's Antonio Brown, that's Antonio Brown. But it wasn't. People like 15, 16, like, Ray Lewis is there. Orlando Pace is there. Joe Flacco's there. Von Miller is there, okay? But yet, like, everybody is around this guy. Santonio Holmes. Everybody wants their picture taken with Santonio Holmes. Everybody wants an autograph from Santonio Holmes. Everybody's enamored with Santonio Holmes in a room that is full of NFL Hall of Famers and great players, great current players, great former players. Everybody's enamored with Santonio Holmes. Why? Because they thought it was Antonio Brown. Like that's at least what I overheard. And it's one of those things where when one guy goes up and wants to take a picture, then another guy goes, and then another guy, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, who's that guy? Who is he? Oh, I think it's Antonio Brown. Oh my God, it's Antonio Brown. They're shaking his hand. I didn't know if Santonio Holmes knew exactly what was happening, or if he just felt like, yeah, these are all, big time Ohio State fans, or I don't know what they thought, but they could not have been that enamored with Santonio Holmes. That is just not possible. So apologies to Santonio Holmes, but I think again everybody just misidentified Antonio Brown for Santonio Holmes, which was really funny. My favorite part of that will be when people when those people show their pictures to other people, like, oh, I got a picture with Antonio Brown, and people are like, that's not Antonio Brown, it's Santonio Holmes. Von Miller was there, and you got a picture with Santonio Holmes. All right, our big story today is OTA, which everybody calls them OTAs. My preference is OTA because it's not multiple this is just one. We're talking about one off-season training activity, not multiple off-season training activities. But the one in particular we're talking about is the one that concludes today in the Cowboys complex in Frisco. Scott D'Amico in the house. D-Law watching as well. What up, D-Law? So the first voluntary off-season training activity going on concludes today in Frisco for the Cowboys. Then their next one will be, it's basically like every week now until the mandatory minicamp, which is June 12th to the 14th. So they conclude their first voluntary OTA today. Then their next one will be May 29th through the 31st. Then the one after that will be June 4th through the 6th. So basically the next 3 weekends, week into the weekend, we'll be talking about voluntary off-season training activities for the Dallas Cowboys, which all leads into their final work before they go to Oxnard, California in August, which is mandatory minicamp June 12th through the 14th. So we are at the end of the first of basically three more off-season training activities. And look, I've talked about this a lot. The popularity of the NFL season and off-season is why it's the golden goose of professional sports. Say whatever you want about the popularity of the NFL, boycotting the league, whatever. The NFL made $14 billion in revenue last year. $14 billion in profit last year. 11 of the top 20 highest-rated television programs of 2018 were NFL games. Okay, it's the golden goose of America and modern sports. And to me, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? I think the aesthetics of television are conducive to a sport with high athleticism like football. But I also think they lay out their offseason in a way that just continues to pique interest for fans. And on top of that, they also, because there is so much... All right, I'm making myself bigger because I've told that I'm too small on camera. There we go. So now I'm bigger. Blowing myself up. All right. So the reason for the NFL's popularity is because of the offseason. Now, the one thing is, you look at the NBA. They have a good offseason, but the problem is it's hard for them to sell optimism. So the NFL is really, really good at selling optimism. That's the most important thing, right? Like, they have teams that consistently go from worst to first, and they always like to trumpet that. Now, I think last season was the first time that it hasn't happened in over a decade. They haven't talked about it. But it's the truth, right? Like, you can be bad one year and then be a playoff team the next year. So one team can win the regular season, right? Only one team wins a Super Bowl. But 31 teams can win the offseason. And that's why the NFL is so popular. Because they lay their offseason out selling optimism. So the Super Bowl happens and it flows right into the NFL Combine, which flows, right into the draft, which flows right into the schedule release, which people get excited about, which flows, free agency, and then you get into mini camps. And I know I'm out of order a bit, and I apologize for that, but that's just how it works, right? Like, you have free agency, the combine, free agency, the draft, the schedule release, mini camps. Like, it just you have enough. You're given enough throughout the offseason that really sets you up to buy into the success your team is going to have, and then it all leads into the what we're going through now, which is there's been all this excitement over the draft and free agency and the schedule release, and now we're seeing these players on the field in an off-season training activity capacity, and so it's all leading up to the final mandatory minicamp, and then of course there is then there's training camp, and then you're right into the season with preseason games. So I mean, the only time where there's a pretty long dead period of the NFL, off-season, regular season, whatever it is that period after the mandatory minicamp at the end of June through the end of July, basically one full month where it's like rest up and get ready for the next month and stay in shape to get back ready to go to training camp. Larry Mannix chiming in on the Phantom page saying Jacksonville was a good story last year. I thought they were going to make it happen. Right, like again, that's why the NFL is great at selling optimism. And even though Jacksonville's been rebuilding for years and years and years, the idea that, well, they were really bad one year, and look at how good they were the next year, getting it all the way to the AFC Championship game. And, I mean, it's not just a fallacy, it is truth. There is truth to it. But that's why the NFL is so popular, because their offseason is set up to where there's very few periods without any activity going on, and they're selling optimism. They're selling optimism that, well, my team might have been bad last year, but it's certainly going to be good this year. So I say all that to say that's why the NFL is so popular, and so what you have as part of the media machine of the NFL is reaction and overreaction and emphasis on all the things that are going on. That's not to say people in the media are making a story out of nothing, but it's to say like you have to search for stories to find stories in off-season training activities, right? Like it's great to feed the beast. But and people are interested in the storylines and the takeaways from OTAs. Like, what are you really gauging from it? There are very few. This rookie looked great. That carries over then into training camp, which then carries over to the regular season. Like a lot of times, the biggest stories and surprise stories of training camps become a non-story by the time you get into week 3. Like this one guy or two guys in training camp will be like, I can't believe they made the roster. What a big story. By the time week 3 rolls around the regular season, you won't even remember who that guy was. But I digress. Here are the big takeaways from the first 3 days of off-season training activities for the Dallas Cowboys in Frisco, Texas. The biggest, most prevailing narrative that's come out of this Cowboys off-season is this notion of Dak friendly. I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you know what it means. It follows the Romo-friendly mantra that the Cowboys had for a long, long time with Tony Romo as their quarterback. It's fairly simple to understand. The Cowboys wanted to make an offense and put an offense behind and with Tony Romo that was conducive to his skill set. What a novel concept. Every team should adopt this just unbelievably revolutionary idea. My quarterback, what he does well. We should put guys around him that will make the things that he does well even better. We should put my quarterback in position to be successful. Wow, what an amazing, life-changing concept. No, Zach, I am not saying that the Cowboys can win the Super Bowl this year. John Wesley says, no, the Bears cannot win the Super Bowl this year. John Dyer says, quote, Dak friendly is code for run the ball so he doesn't have to throw it down the field. Yeah, that's a big part of it. I don't disagree with you there. I also think another big part of it is, and excuse me as I scroll through all the pages I'm live on right now and kind of try to get to some of the questions that are being asked. Another part of it is the stable of wide receivers they have, right? Like, they have a bunch of different guys that can play a bunch of different roles, do a bunch of different things, and so that's another thing, right? Like, not necessarily having a legitimate number one wide receiver, but having a bunch of different guys, a bunch of different skill sets. Nicholas Wickersham in the house. What up? JC Art watching as well. What's going on, guys? Make sure to post your comments. Share the post if you like what I'm talking about. If you don't like what I'm talking about. But the biggest sort of talking point to come out of this Cowboys offseason, and we'll continue to go back to this, is the notion of Dak friendly. Cowboys being Dak friendly. And, I think what that means, one, as John Dyer pointed out, is certainly, they want to run the football. No question. And that's not Dak friendly so much as it is Zeke friendly, because they've got a really good running back they spent the 4th overall pick on, so why wouldn't they run him into the ground? But, there's also dynamics of the way they're going to play call, which is, zone read, a lot of zone read principles. Beyond that, other Dak friendly components will be the age of the team, the offense maybe more specifically. And I'm going to get to this quote that I have here from Todd Archer's piece on Dak friendly today at ESPN.com. But Tyron Smith is the oldest player on the Cowboys offense. Tyron Smith is 27 years old. He is the oldest player on the Cowboys offense. This is Dak friendly because though I think Dak has shown great leadership qualities with Jason Witten and Dez Bryant, older guys in the roster and older guys in the team, I also think having a younger roster is probably, it almost makes him the elder statesman on that team. And if you have a bunch of quiet guys along their offensive line, and they're the older guys, they're the veterans, right? Like, they're the guys with the skins of the wall, Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, that those guys tend to be more quiet leaders, lead by example guys, then they'll all sort of defer to Dak, who, can lead Jason Witten in some ways, and Jason Witten is certainly going to listen to Dak, but it's just a different dynamic. Like, that's kind of the thing, right? Like, with Witten, and look, I think they wanted Witten back. Dez may be a different story altogether, but I just think there's something that plays into the age of the roster and how conducive, that could be to helping Dak become the best leader that he could be. Here's the other thing about the roster. Say what you will about, Joe D's in the house, who's always getting hurt the past few years. Say what you will about Jason Garrett. I'm not the biggest Jason Garrett fan in the world. I think he's got a fatal flaw when it comes to being an overly conservative head coach. But, I also think this roster is Jason Garrett friendly. And what I mean by that is, like, Jason Garrett's leadership style is kind of rah-rah. It's kind of hokey, kind of viewed as being a little hokey. And I think that stales on older players. I think that the message kind of gets stale on older guys. That's why I think this roster is probably more Jason Garrett friendly too. He is more of a college kind of rah-rah type coach. And older guys may sour on that style. Younger guys probably buy into it more. And look, that's probably not, what that means is you probably have to turn off your roster multiple times over, because unless you're just successful with these guys to start, and then you mold that culture of the rah-rah style that they're okay with. But I think the roster being young is as much conducive to Jason Garrett and Jason Garrett friendly as it is Dak Prescott friendly. Joe Deasy says Smith, Tyron Smith is always hurt. Yeah, he was 19, 20. He was I remember when he started at left tackle his rookie year, he was the youngest player in the league at that point. And look, Tyron Smith was at one point the best left tackle in the game. He still certainly is. The problem is he's got a bad back. And those things don't change. Steve Sosa says Cowboys with Romo, I don't know what you mean. Clarify there. Post your comments, hit the share button. Whatever you guys want to talk about, I figured I'd focus on Dak friendly. Because, look, we can talk about the other takeaways from the offseason training activity so far. I'm not a scout. I don't fancy myself a scout. I'm kind of, I'm just an observer. And I think there's a lot of things when you're there at practice, at OTA, that you may pick up that if you read about, it would kind of, the thing is, if you read about these takeaways, then, you kind of have to be there to make observations, I guess is the best way to put it. Because you're going to see different things, and so much of what you're observing is the stuff that's not on the field. right? Like it's everything else, and that was something important I learned in covering the San Antonio Spurs locally in San Antonio. You know, I used to go to a lot of Spurs games, and and then when my son was born, my son's 2.5 now. But in his first year of life, he was born in November, right at the beginning of the NBA season. I didn't go to any Spurs games that year. I did not go to any Spurs games the first year of my son's life. And what I figured out was, man, you miss a lot when you're not there. Because I read and figured, oh, I could just catch up by reading. And that's not the case. You have to be there because when you're at games and you're going to practice, like, it's not about the things that happen on the field. That's what we're missing here. It's everything else. Everything else is important, right? How do coaches interact with players? How do the players interact? Those kinds of things, like those are the types of things the observations you make that sort of guide the things you see on the field, and not vice versa. And I think that's a very important thing. But with that being said, I mean, the big talking points from OTA so far are, I think people who are watching the Cowboys are excited about the receiving corps, despite the fact that it doesn't look great. Yeah, bad backs don't get any better, Joe Dees, that's right. Dak can't throw receivers open. That's Dak friendly. That's why they've gotten receivers that they think can create separation at the line of scrimmage. Instead of Dak throwing guys open, that they're going to get guys that get open. Steve Sosa says when the Cowboys were with Romo were down 3 touchdowns, I wasn't worried. With Dak's team down 3 touchdowns, and I think the game is over. Yeah, but, again, I understand the comparisons of Romo and Dak. I understand it. But let's not compare Dak Prescott in year 3 to Tony Romo in year 10. Let's not do that. It's not a game that Dak's going to win. I mean, yeah, Romo down 3 touchdowns, you weren't worried, but that wasn't the case in his first couple of years in the NFL, right? It grew and grew like that. By the way, a lot of people that are Cowboys fans, Cowboys fans are pretty split on Romo as far as if he was a great quarterback. A lot of Cowboys fans felt like, I'm obviously not telling people something they don't already know, but obviously a lot of Cowboys fans thought that, they needed to move on from Romo, that he was more of a hammerman than anything else. Nicholas Wickersham says Jason Garrett comes off disingenuous sometimes. I would say Jason Garrett comes off disingenuous all the time. It's one of the things that I dislike the most about Jason Garrett is how disingenuous he appears. To me, I always said, like, they say dress for the job you want. Like, that's Jason Garrett to me. Like, project the aura of the coach you want to be. Like, dress for the job you want. Like, Jason Garrett projects sort of this aura of the coach he wants to be, as opposed to just being his own man. And I think there's, like, truth in that insofar as, like, he was obviously on the 90s Cowboys teams as a quarterback to Troy, and he constantly talks about the 90s Cowboys and, being like the 90s Cowboys. So, I mean, I do think there's, like, he brings up Jimmy Johnson and Michael Irvin, and I get it. Like, he learned from the greats. He learned from a great organization and a great team at that point in time. But that just plays into this idea that he projects out the aura of the coach that he wants to be as opposed to the coach that he could be. By the way, I'm Ari Temkin. It's Showtime live here on Phantom. We're broadcasting on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. I want to thank our partners on Facebook, Law Nation. I'm going to be broadcasting a Cowboys discussion with the guys at Law Nation. My buddy Lawrence Thomas, the Law Nation, Big Game James, and Derek from the Dallas Prospect. I'll be broadcasting with them tonight on YouTube, so check it out at 9 o'clock. But I'm also broadcasting through their pages, so go check out those pages as well. And I'm trying to scroll through all the pages at once to get everybody's comments, to make sure that everybody's, because they don't aggregate to one page. So that's basically the point here. Corey Cole, ADC, you joined us on the Phantom page. What up, buddy? What up, guys? Joe Deasy says, Zeke's longevity is in jeopardy with Dak at quarterback unless Dak can become a better passer. Yeah, I agree, but, like, remember, there is very little longevity when it comes to running backs in the modern NFL anyways. When they drafted Zeke, the problem with drafting a running back at 4th overall is because the average career of an NFL player is 2.5 years. The average career of a running back is 2. Now, granted, he's going to exceed that, but by how much more? Like, the problem with taking a running back at 4th overall is longevity is a major question. Also, priority at the position based on, availability of, say, like a guy like Jordan Howard, who's in the same draft in the 6th round, who's, puts up pretty comparable production. Now, Jordan Howard is not as complete of a running back as Zeke Elliott is. That's true. Jordan Howard is not the pass catcher out of the backfield that Zeke is. He's not the block. Jordan Howard's a good blocker. He's not the blocker that Zeke is. Zeke was when they drafted him and is now he's a 5-tool player. We call him 5-tool players in baseball, and I mean he's a great blocker. He is as good of a blocker at the running back position as he is a runner. He's as good of a pass catcher at the position as he is a runner and a blocker. Like he is so talented and so good at every aspect of the position that I understand why the Cowboys took him at 4th. And I'm not saying it was a mistake. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons you don't take a running back at 4th overall. And your Munoz in the house. Everybody hit the share button, by the way, if you wouldn't mind. Also post your comments and help us drive a bigger audience to the table here every single day as I broadcast on Phantom with Showtime. We're talking about Cowboys off-season training, Dak friendly. So here's the quote, and I want to make sure I can see it. Here's the quote from Todd Archer of ESPN. ESPN Dallas. I want to get the quote again, so let me just pull it up on my phone here. And boom, let's see. Can I find it? Let's see, hopefully. All right, here we go. Okay. Here's the comment. Here's the quote. I want to make sure I'm getting it right. Oh, man, I'm like really blind. Quote, Dak's the guy that surprised me when I first got here, Hearns said. This is Alan Hearns in Todd Archer's article. Just being year 3, you don't see that leadership from those guys. Yeah, he be a quarterback. He had to grow up early, but he's a very vocal leader, and he's one that leads by example as well in the weight room, on the field, during conditioning. He wants to be first. That surprised me a lot with Witten gone. Yeah, he's a bigger leader for us. He's going to be truly missed, but I think Dak got it all under control, being the head man in charge. So it's an interesting quote for multiple reasons. First of all, it's Alan Hearns, who is just in his first work with the Dallas Cowboys. So he has literally no idea what Jason Witten was as a leader because he never played with him. And he comes from the Jacksonville Jaguars organization where he's played his entire career. So it's almost as if, now look, he played in college, obviously, so it's not like Blake Bortles is the only quarterback he's ever played under, but it's an interesting way to look at a quarterback when you've just come from being with Blake Bortles. I don't think it says anything about Blake Bortles. I don't think it says anything really about Dak. You know, like, and I talked about this a lot with coaches. Like, if you're a coach, there are a bunch of different boxes, right? Like leadership, mentality, motivations, you know, offense, defense, schemes, ability to adapt, evolve, make adjustments. Like these are all the boxes that, you know, coaches check off. And the majority of coaches don't check off every box. In fact, I don't know that there are very few coaches. Pop, maybe one in the NBA. I'm not sure that Bill Belichick is in the NFL, but they're like, you can probably count on one hand the amount of coaches that check off every box, right? But every coach checks off one or two of those boxes. You know, I think the same is true with players too, and probably quarterbacks, since it's a very difficult position to play, and since there's so many different important attributes to quarterbacks, right? Like, you need your quarterback to be a leader. You don't need your tight end to be a leader. You don't need your running back to be a leader. You don't need your wide receiver to be a leader. You don't need your defensive end to be a leader. Your quarterback, there is no other position on the football field that demands leadership than the quarterback. So it's kind of, to me, a joke to bring up any attribute of leadership from a quarterback, because you can't be a quarterback unless you're a leader, period. Like, I'm convinced you can't even become a starting quarterback in the NFL without being a leader, right? Like, we can make fun of all of the quarterbacks that are starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and there are a lot of bad ones, but like, they all, at some point, were the best quarterbacks by far in their high school, region, college. So, like, no boxes for Tyronn Lue. Maybe one or two. But, like, at one point in time, you know, even the worst quarterback in the NFL was the best quarterback in his conference, college football, in, you know, they have the attributes to be successful, right? Like, you can't be drafted or play or start in the NFL without having attributes, and leadership's one of them. John Dyer says, I can't see Andy Dalton as a leader. You know, leadership is evident in so many different capacities, so many different facets, right? Like there are all different kinds of leaders and motivators. And this is all a long way to say that of all the boxes for quarterback, like the number one box that I never questioned about Dak Prescott from the start was leadership. Like there were great stories about, leadership from Dak even before he was named the starter, or like right after he was named the starter at training camp. I was at Cowboys training camp when Romo gets hurt and then Kellen Moore goes down. I was standing right there when Kellen Moore got hurt at training camp a couple of years, 3 years back. And it was like, now it's Dak Prescott's turn. It was this amazing thing where we know Romo's hurt. Now Kellen Moore goes down. No. Romo wasn't hurt at that point. He got hurt in the first preseason game. So Kellen Moore goes down. It was like all of a sudden now, this fourth-round draft pick, Dak Prescott, is thrust into being the backup and one hit away from a guy that's been injured a lot, which is Romo. And so Kellen Moore goes down. It's like this just rush of media members just run on over to Dak Prescott, who had no attention whatsoever at training camp the entire process prior to. And, like even in that moment, you saw great leadership qualities. And thank God Kellen Moore got hurt, yeah. And then the things that he said and how he handled Dez. And Liz Barcoma says she shared it. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. Frank Ramirez says Pop's the best. Yeah, he's a pretty good coach. Just check out the other pages. Law Nation. The Law Nation page is great. Big Game James as well. Not a lot of activity in the comment section on these other pages. Unless I'm just missing them. Joe Boo also. Zero comments in the Joe Boo page. Somebody go to the Cowboy Joe Boo page and at least post one comment, please. Somebody. So it's not that lonely. Anyways, I digress. I'm already tempted to Showtime. Make sure to hit the share button. Like the page at Phantom. Check us out every day at noon. I go live, noon central. I go live, and then after me, 1 o'clock, it's the TJ Carpenter Experience. So expanding our live lineup, plus we've got a lot of great partners, lots of great content. So we are the New World Order of sports media with lots of great stuff going on. So check it all out. Make sure to like the page and get notifications. Subscribe to the show, which you can do now. Go to the Phantom page. Even click the link here at facebook.com/Watch Phantom. You can subscribe to the show there. That way you'll get notified every day when we go live. All right, so leadership with Dak. So this quote that you see on the screen here that Todd Archer got from Alan Hearns is funny because it's from Alan Hearns. So to me, so if you listen to the Jason Garrett press conferences throughout OTAs, then you've heard a lot of the media like, well, who are the leaders that need to step? Like you can hear the stories they're trying to write and therefore asking questions to the coaches, to the players that will lead them to give them the answer they want. And one of those is leadership void with the absence of Dez and Witten, which it's funny because didn't we decide that the Cowboys released Dez because they didn't like the leadership style that he had? So it doesn't really seem like there's really a leadership void. And I even heard, forget who it was yesterday, it was like, yeah, but Dez was really emphatic and emotional. Like, who's going to replace that? And Garrett was like, well, I mean, we've got all different kinds of leaders. And it was like, wait, they released Dez because they didn't like that emotion, that kind of leadership. So why would they be looking for another guy to replace that? But I think what a lot of people are trying to get is, what kind of leader is Dak? But we already know what kind of leader Dak is. Because that's, again, of all the boxes that a quarterback needs to check off, that's one of them. And Joe Deasy's brought this up, his ability to go down the field, his ability to throw guys open, like that, those aren't boxes that he necessarily checks off, at least not that we've seen throughout the course of his career so far. But leadership is one. Dak's always been a good leadership, and then of course there's always the subcategories within leadership, right? Because like leadership is this broad, cover-all in sports that like, one guy might lead in one way that we think is positive, and then there's another player that might lead in the exact same way, and we think that's negative. One guy might lead in one way, and we don't even think that's leadership. But another guy might lead in another way, and we know that's... Like, the thing about the way that the media and fans talk about leadership is, it's so broad and so all-encompassing that it's kind of difficult to even really wrap up what it truly is. But I think in the most basic sense of what you need out of your quarterback from a leadership standpoint, what that is in particular is deferring successes, absorbing failures, and because of that, guys want to follow you. That's the thing is, you can't, like leadership, you can't tell somebody who the leader is. Hey, that guy's the leader. that guy's our leader. That guy's our leader. The more the locker room tries to tell the rest of the guys in the locker room who the leader is, the more that guy's not the leader. The leader of the team is the guy that everybody knows. It's self-evident that guy's leader. That's Dak. Dak has certainly some flaws and negatives and boxes he doesn't check off. But the ability to accept responsibility for failures, defer responsibility for successes, and be a guy that guys want to follow, not because they're being asked to follow him, but because they want to follow him, that's Dak Prescott. There's no question about that. There shouldn't be any questions about that. There shouldn't have ever been any questions about that. The Cowboys' success, though, this year doesn't hinge on Dak Prescott's leadership. We already know that he's a good leader. The questions we now have are, can he make teams pay through the air with his arm? Can he be a quarterback? Can he play the game in the pocket? Steve Young, who I think at times can be one of the best analysts in sports, I'll never forget, he was telling a great story about Bill Walsh, legendary NFL coach of the 49ers. And I'm not sure it was his rookie year with the 49ers, but he was this, young, exciting player, from BYU, has the dual threat ability, right? And it was like I'll just keep the story broad. It was a third down in a preseason game. Steve Young was, it was his rookie year, okay? And, so let's not. It was during the regular season. Third down, young quarterback, trying to learn the game, dual threat guy, right? So Steve Young, dances the pocket, gets outside the pocket, runs upfield, gets a first down. It's like 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11. He ran for a first down. And so everybody's excited, big first down. They just converted to third down. Everybody's excited and hooting and hollering. And, when he eventually gets off the field, his coach pulls him over and, it's like, hey, Coach, you weren't excited about that play? Like, Bill Walsh clearly wasn't as excited as everybody else at the sideline was from the play that led, to a first down on third down. And it's like, so, what, you weren't excited? What's kind of the problem there? And so Bill Walsh looked at him and said, you didn't exercise the play. You didn't exercise the full play. And the way Steve Young explained it was, that's a great play that I made, but I was taking a shortcut. I didn't sit in the pocket and make sure that I looked through every read that I possibly could before I took off. Like, what Steve Young was saying is, Tom Brady, some of what makes Tom Brady great is his limitations. Tom Brady couldn't do that. Tom Brady couldn't, at any point in his career, turn upfield, get upfield, and run with his legs, right? Like, so one of his disadvantages, an inability as an athletic quarterback, was an advantage because that forced him to play the game from the pocket, forced him to look at every read he had along the field and make the right read and throw the ball there. That's what Bill Walsh was telling Steve Young to do. Yeah, you have this great ability to use your athleticism, but remember, you are a quarterback. So make sure if your first read's not there, if your second read's not there, if your third read's not there, if your fourth read's not there, then you get a field. But don't all of a sudden now first read there, not there, second read's not there, now get a field and start running. How many dual threat quarterbacks do that? Totally and utterly, completely exercise the entirety of the play. And I think Dak Prescott had a lot of success in his rookie year with his legs. And not just his running ability, but the threat of his running ability and the zone read. And those were things that worked out very well for him. But I'll go back to what Steve Young said. This game is won from the pocket. You want to win a championship? You're not going to win with zone read being your base offense. You may read with a play here or there that catches them off guard, but you can win 12 or 13 games, get the playoffs with that. You can't win a Super Bowl with that. No, because once it gets down to a few teams and here or there, like they are going to force you to be uncomfortable. So if you're a dual threat guy, the best way for you to become uncomfortable is if a team forces you to stay in the pocket and make throws from the pocket. By the way, Aaron Rodgers is a great example of that. That's a guy that exercises the entire play. I mean, he's constantly got his eye. Like, he doesn't want to run until he has to. John Dyer says, sounds like Pop and Manu. Pop had a strict plan but allows Manu to be the wild card. but grilled Parker to death until Parker complied. But I think football is a bit different so far as, in basketball you can have one guy that freelances. In football, if a guy freelances, it throws the entire fluidity of a playoff. That's, in football, you need cohesion. It's the ultimate game of cohesion. So if you've got one guy that's doing his own thing, it's going to throw off the cohesion of the play itself. So let's go back to this idea that we've been talking about, Dak friendly and Dak leadership. That, to me, that's a non-story this offseason. Dak's the leader. We already knew that. Dak was the leader when Jason Witten was on this roster. Dak was the leader when Tony Romo was on this roster, okay? So Dak's a leader. We know that. He's even more a leader now than he ever was. But we know he's going to be a good leader. The question is, can Dak Prescott win the game from the pocket? Can Dak Prescott win football games from the pocket? Now, we might not have the entire answer because it's just year 3. And the development of a quarterback to just win the game from the pocket takes time. 3-4 years time. But we need to see what we didn't see last year. Which was, last year he didn't look like a guy that could consistently win the game from the pocket. All right, I'm Ari Temkin. Again, I want to remind everybody, check us out on the Law Nation YouTube page. Go to YouTube, search Law Nation. I'll be broadcasting with those guys. Law Nation, Big Game, James and Derek from the Dallas Prospect at 9 o'clock Central tonight, talking Cowboys with those gentlemen on the Law Nation page. So check us out there. Coming up next, though, it's the TJ Carpenter Show right here on Phantom, Facebook's Sports Network. So make sure to tune in to the great work that my buddy TJ Carpenter is doing, the TJ Carpenter Show. That is coming up next right here on Phantom.